Not asking for money then.
And I think, Petra, that you certainly have the ability to participate as much as you want to. So I would welcome that, that if you're willing to take this on, that you also participate. So I'm fine with that. I think that's a great idea.
Sorry to interrupt. Who nominated Petra and who seconded?
Mike Campbell nominated.
Thanks, Mike.
And Martin
I
Johansson
second,
seconded.
yeah.
And Martin, sorry, Martin who?
Johansson.
Johansson.
That bottom one.
Thank you.
So with that, Petra, I pronounce you chair.
It's the toughest election ever.
I just have a technical question because I'm a newbie at these meetings. Is there a way that I can see all of you at one time?
Hit your
Yes.
view button,
Hit my what?
your video.
Go to gallery
If you-
view.
Yeah.
I think he's using a Commodore 64. Go slow.
All right, settle down over there, Ed.
Usually
What's
top
the top
corner, there's
left, Barry? Top left, and you will see a there will be a view button, and you press
Oh,
that, it'll say
Switch
gallery
to
view.
gallery. Oh,
Yeah.
hey.
There you go.
Everybody. Okay,
Awesome.
now I feel like
So, so with that, Petra, I will hand the meeting off to you, and
Oh,
we'll fill in all the blanks as we go along here.
excellent. Okay. So third item on the agenda then is, are there any additions or changes to the agenda today? Anyone? Nope. All right. So welcome and introductions. I don't know if you had a particular way to do welcome and introductions in mind, or if we should just go around the screen. I can call on people as I see them in my order, whatever you
Sure.
whatever you-
No, I think
Yeah.
that's good. I think everybody, there are a few people that I'm sure people don't know and where they're from or who you represent. So that would be awesome.
Okay, so if it's fine with everybody, then I'll just go through as I see people on my screen. So my name is Petra Vance-Millen. I'm a town councillor in Oliver, and I'm very excited for this process to be underway. I think, in my opinion, it's been a long time coming. We've been batting the ideas around for 4 or 5 years at least. And so whatever the outcome is, I'm excited to be involved in the process. And next on my screen is Town of Soyuz. I'm assuming that's Gerald.
I'm not sure, but I can jump in there. Yes, it is.
If you're Gerald, then that's it.
I'm Gerald Davis. I'm the Director of Community Services with the Town of Soyuz. I know most everybody, and I've been with the town for a little over 16 years. I've actually been through this process before, which I think some of us have, and I'm pretty interested to see as well, good or bad.
Thank you. And Sarah.
Hi, I'm Sarah. I'm the program supervisor with the Town of Soyuz. I'm here to take minutes, but I'm really excited to be even doing that and find out about the process, because I'm really excited about the prospect of a aquatic center.
Thank you. Kathy.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Kathy Cowan. I'm the CAO with the Town of Oliver for a little bit longer. I'm also interested in seeing how this project goes forward and the outcomes. I think that it's something that, like Councillor Ventimiglia indicated, needs to, who's sharing their screen? That needs to have the process go through, whether it's positive or negative at the end of it. But I think it's something that is needed. And also the minute taking will be shared between, I do believe, Soyuz and Oliver. So you will see Rochelle coming through at meetings. It'll be going rotation in and out. So just so that you're all aware of that. And
Thank you, Kathy. And for those that are not aware, Kathy is in her final weeks as our CAO. So we'll be joined by our new CAO at these meetings come summertime. Calvin.
Sorry, just finding my unmute button. Hi, Cal Meiklejohn with Meiklejohn Architectural Design Studio, or we call ourselves MAD Studio because I still have a brother who practices in Kelowna, and we talk, but we're separate firms. And I'm glad to be part of this process. We've done a lot of work in various municipalities at recreation and aquatic centers, so we're part of a good team. We've worked with John on a few things for the city of Penticton before and know that he's really quite good at what he does, and so we're happy to be a part of it. And I know Mr. King from Rotary, and I know Mr. Bennett from other things in golf, and I know his worship from Oliver from his time in Kelowna, and who else? And Sue I've met at SOS Arts, so I know a lot of faces, but I'm looking forward to meeting you all. Oh, and Carol from time in Penticton as well. So hi, everybody I know, and glad to meet everybody I haven't. Looking forward to the process.
Thank you. Sue.
Thank you. Hi, Sue McCordoff, Mayor of Vesuvius. And I think that this is a really good process to go through. It's certainly something that the town of Vesuvius, our rec commission, and all of the residents in town have put this as their #1 wish in terms of recreation activities. So whether we run into roadblocks or not, or we can see our way through this, this is an important process for us all to go through. And I think it's really important to recognize that we have Oliver Vesuvius and the OIB involved in this. And that shows cooperation and interest from all of us. So happy to be here. Thank you.
Thanks, Sue. Jim.
Jim King, Councillor of the Town of Soyuz. Really looking forward to working with the consultants. This kind of has been on the back burner for 3 or 4 years. So it's really nice to see it move forward and all the people involved. So I look forward to a great summer.
Thank you, Jim. Carol.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Carol Sheridan. I'm the manager of Parks and Recreation in Oliver and have been appointed by the town of Oliver to sit on the committee. And I'm really grateful to be a part of this process. This will be my first experience with a multi-community process like this. And so I'm grateful for the opportunity, and it's really nice to meet you all.
Thank you. So next on my screen is Kevin Vetch and Co. And I know it's not Kevin, so it's hard to see who's in the room. You're tiny little people on my screen, so just go ahead.
Go ahead, Sam.
Sammy Louie, council member for the Osoyoos Indian Band. Good morning, everyone. Just wanted to reiterate, what Sue was saying is we're always looking forward to working with both communities, the town of Osoyoos and the town of Oliver, and this has been a long time coming. So we're excited and we hope for a positive outcome.
Thanks, Sammy.
Mike Campbell, Chief Operating Officer for the Soyuz Indian Band Development Corporation. I was involved several years ago wearing a different hat for the town of Soyuz when we started this conversation, and the goal was to work toward a feasibility study. I'm glad we've got to the point where we will finally, at some point in the near future, have the information needed for leadership and communities to make an informed decision whether this project can and should move forward. So thank you.
Hello, Sonia Jensen, newly elected council member for the Osoyoos Indian Band. And I'm just looking forward to being a part of this committee.
Thanks, and congratulations on your election. So my screen just flipped. I'm going to make sure that I haven't missed anybody. Dave Mattis.
Dave Mattis, Councillor, Town of Oliver.
Lost our video.
Easy. A man of few words. That's different. Mayor Johansson.
Thank you, Chair Ventimiglia. Martin Johansson, Mayor for the Town of Oliver. Yes, looking forward to the process. I did go through this years ago, back in 2008-9 with H2O design, and then operated the facility for close to 10 years, I guess. So have some input. I think that'll be valuable to the process. Great to see some familiar faces. Cal, I haven't talked to you or seen you for a long time. You're looking good. And looking forward to getting to know some of the other people on here that I've never seen before. So let's get going.
Thank you. Myers.
Myers Bennett, Councillor, Town of Soyuz, and really looking forward to seeing this move forward.
Thanks, Myers. John.
Hi, good morning, everyone. John Hack, I'm the project lead. I'm with Sierra Planning and Management. And we have a team comprised of ourselves, MAD Studios with Cal, and there's one other specialist firm that will be used as and when needed, and that is an engineering firm related to some particulars of tools. So you can see that we intend to try and answer as many questions as we can on this study, because the one thing we do know when doing these feasibility studies is they are most useful when there is good and detailed conversation around the table. And I'm very pleased to see that I think we as a group, the advisory committee here, of which we are participants in terms of providing information to you, I think we're scheduled to meet 5 or 6 times through the course of the study. So that's really encouraging, because I think we need to make sure that we provide you with enough good and relevant information that you can make decisions.
Thank you, John. Chantel.
I don't know if you can see me because I don't know how to use Zoom.
We can see you.
I live in Oliver, and I'm excited for this process to start. I would love a pool, and I'll do all we can to make this happen.
Thanks, Chantel. It's nice to have you. I believe that the last but not least on my screen is Barry.
Thanks, Petra. Yeah, first of all, thanks to the town of Soyuz for allowing me to jump back into this process. This is something that when I was involved earlier as the CAO for the town, I just saw it as one of the most exciting opportunities for all the communities and the region as a whole, not only from a service perspective, but just to make the region grow. And if it's going to work, you need good information and you need the support of the people. And that was always the plan, to get out there and provide an excellent feasibility study that would hopefully provide that information to allow people to make good decisions. So I'm just excited about this whole process and happy to be a part of it. Thanks.
Thank you, Barry. So have I missed anyone? I don't think so. That phone number that's there at the bottom, that's attributed to band chambers. Yeah, okay. All right, so thank you, everybody. We're on to our terms of reference up for review. Who would like to take that one on?
I could just introduce that. I just wanted to make sure that everybody had a copy of the terms of reference, and they're actually familiar with the process and what we're doing. And really, if there were any questions that we need to clarify before we actually get going, I'm really happy that somebody stepped up to be chair. So thank you very, very much. And that's pretty much it, really. Everybody should have gotten a copy, but if anybody has any questions or would like to go over something for clarity, that's why I wanted to put that on here.
Thank you. Did anybody have any questions after giving it a read through? Has everybody had a chance to read through the terms of reference?
Yes. Skim through. Okay.
Yeah. If there are no questions now, that's fine. If any questions come up as we're going through, I'm sure we can deal with them, or Gerald can answer them via email. Everything seemed pretty straightforward. It was good information. Okay, thank you. So we're on to number 6 on our agenda, which is review project schedule, and then I will be turning things over to Sierra Planning.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. If we could, see if I can share the screen. Hopefully I can. Yes, thank you. if you can just let me know whether you can see that on screen.
Yeah, I can see it. And everybody else?
Yeah.
Yes.
Maybe wondering why we have pictures of people playing soccer as well. But I will make that apparent as we go through it. So, can everyone see that okay? A larger screen?
Perfect.
So what we wanted to do is just take the opportunity, as this is the first meeting, to run through the work program that we have and touch on some of the key points. We have had an introductory meeting just with Gerald and Mike Campbell, Kathy, and Alan, to just run through some of the mechanics of our proposal and prep for this process. And as a result, I want to talk to you about a couple of items on the public consultation side of things. So we'll do that. But just to go through this, just to reconfirm who we are, I'm just going to put everyone's faces on the bottom of the screen for my benefit. There we go. So myself, John Hack, lead consultant. Just to give you a little bit of flavor, I'm been doing this quite a long time. Our practice is out of Toronto, but we work across the country and into the States on occasion for a range of planning and feasibility assignments. So this kind of thing for an aquatic center that involves a partnership arrangement with jurisdictions, it's the kind of thing that we are familiar with. But of course, on any project, doesn't matter whether it's down the road from where we are in Toronto or in a different time zone, one of the first things we have to do is make sure we get up to speed on all of the information and some of the history, the good and the bad, as it relates to previous attempts to make this project come to fruition. So that's who we are. By all means, check out our website just for a little bit more flavor about the kinds of experience we have, if that's of relevance. There'll be other people from this office assisting with me on the project. As Cal said, we do have good experience of working in the Okanagan and other parts of BC. Most recently working with the city of Penticton on its arenas strategy to see if it can replenish the supply of arenas and replace some of the older buildings and renovate some of the more valuable ones like the Memorial Arena. Prior to that, working on review of the PTCC, the Convention Center. So have a degree of experience, but when we do any kind of project, we want to make sure that we have a good team. And so with that, we have Cal and his office from Penticton, and we've worked together on, I think, all of those projects with the exception of the PTCC that's involved Cal's office as well. So we have a good relationship in terms of how we work together. And given the current situation with the pandemic, I think it's worth pointing out that we fully intend, as soon as it is protocol and accepted and advised that people can travel, then we'll do so safely. And I hope one of our meetings before we get to the end of this process is a face-to-face meeting for all of us. So we certainly hope that's the case. But until that happens, Cal is going to take on an important role here of working with us in terms of some of our work that we need to do to understand things related to sites and so on. All of the consultation at the moment with members of the public is going to be online, and I'm sure through your own experiences as members of council, business community, it can work. It can work quite well, actually, and so we'll have good conversations about how best to structure that. But we're open to a range of ways in which to do that. One-on-one, small groups, larger public meetings. I won't get into the details of it. It is something that needs to be considered as we work through the process. And then we do have an aquatic specialist that is an engineer. So to the extent that there may be questions raised about site location and how you get utilities to it and what the water consumption is going to be and what that could do to implications about location, we wanted to bring Jamie on board. He and I have worked on a number of projects, somewhat Ontario or East Coast focused, but he's going to be very helpful if we have any particular questions. Just before we go any further, Cal, did you want to just jump in and tell everyone about how you want to be involved in the study?
Well, as John was saying, we're here, we're on the ground. I've driven the road back and forth between our community where I live and Oliver and Soyuz, in and around the Bandlands as well, for 61 years almost now. Well, not quite, but that's how old I am. So I'm born and raised here. I have a good feel for the place. We've also done a lot of work for various communities. First one that comes to mind, as I imagine, the highway is the Soyuz Visitor Center. So we have some presence and a bit of history. We know how important buildings can be to communities. And nowadays too, the process of public involvement has evolved. And I think it's critical to get it right and get it early and have it as broad as possible. And that allows us to take the information away and, as your, let's call ourselves experts, come up with recommendations that consider everything we've heard and at least have heard all the opinions that are out there that people want to share. We've done a fair bit of recreational facility. We just finished a project up at Sun Peaks and Kamloops with the arena fitness facility. And we're working on Summerland Gymnasium right now. We have some aquatic experience at the Penticton Pool. We were involved in that project. And in Summerland many years ago, involved in their fitness room expansion. So we have a fair bit of recreational experience. And through the pandemic as well, we've been involved with a few public hearing processes that some communities are doing for the first time. I think we were the guinea pigs at Summerland for their first DP that went online. And so there are some tricks to doing it right. We're not experts, but we want to be part of a successful process and looking forward to it.
Okay, thanks, Cal. Okay, so project timeline. So we're into May now, obviously. Sorry. We're into May, and the project calls for us to be complete really by the end of October, and I think that's certainly doable. I want to just touch on a few of the tasks if I can, and those who may not be that familiar with the terms of reference that the consulting team responded to, there was a very well thought out approach that is sort of built step on step, so that at the end of it, there would be a document that, with any luck, will be a consensus document in as much as it's been tested through consultation and presentation to to members of the OIB, to residents of the two municipalities, and has been vetted through your role as an advisory committee. And I have read through the terms of reference. So again, I'm certainly really encouraged by the detail of that, because it gives clarity to the process. So that when you get down to the end of October, there is a document that will test, underline that, it will test the feasibility of this concept and hopefully provide a way to go forward with a clear set of next steps as it relates to putting this into practice. From experience, and maybe this is something we can discuss in terms of expectations that people have, you have a project here that involves 3 different study area participants. There are different perspectives. There are different priorities. You know, we assume we'll get into it to find out more about that. But this is going to have to be a collaborative exercise in terms of putting in place. As you may well know, aquatic centers indoor, they represent by far and away the most heavy financial burdens to any operator if you are building and operating what they call a municipal Class A pool. So a Class A pool, that which can be used for the community, as opposed to the kinds of pools that you'll see in, you know, other institutions or in schools or in the hotel sector, for example, resorts. They'll have a range of pools. They won't necessarily have the same form, function, and scale as you'd expect in a municipal environment. And with that comes a certain degree of cost and operating deficit. So that's something that needs to be recognized. And the only thing that a lot of people perhaps don't always understand is, depending how many people you put in that pool on an annual basis, there's the absolute subsidy, you know, the cost to operate this pool. Then there is the cost the subsidy per user. The more people you put in there, the lower the net cost per user. And when you start to do that, you compare it to things like arenas and gymnasia and other centers, you start to see that the benefits of having an aquatic center start to work nicely against the fact that they're these really expensive buildings. So part of what we want to do in running through the process here, again, with your concurrence or advice, that's relevant, start to understand what the cost implications are, but what the value proposition is for a pool. I think that's something that has to be essential to make this work effectively. Just to get into the program itself, the first part is to review existing services. So what that means is we do want to understand where people currently go in terms for a range of aquatics services. So whether that be indoor or wait for the seasonal outdoor opportunities, or they don't do anything at all. These are things we really want to be able to get a handle on. Everybody likes to do benchmarking around the region, around the country, in terms of what pools are being built elsewhere, and the particular services and great amenities that are provided. We will do that, but again, part of our job, we think, is to make sure that we clearly articulate what the implications of various choices are for type of facility. With all of that, we're going to establish some standards, what we call standards of service. So just as you would with arenas, parks, and other kinds of facilities, what is an acceptable standard that everyone should be working toward as something that is essentially publicly funded by the study participants if it was to go forward and become an operating entity. So that's important, that we get a sense of what we think, just from research elsewhere, should be the level of service. And what that does mean is, and the reason Cal is involved here as well, is what does that mean in terms of the actual building? What does it mean in terms of the pool? Is it one tank? Is it 2 tanks? Is it different kinds of tank combinations? Is it more competitive? Is it more recreational? Is there a lobby group for a 50-meter Olympic pool that we need to talk to, or are we going to be able to move quickly to the more practical opportunities? These are the things we're going to be discussing. In terms of reference, call for a technical report at the end of each of these phases. It's a technical memorandum, but I think it's pretty good that we would write up our findings and provide those in a digestible format for this committee to be able to review and ask questions as we move through the phases. Phase 3 is without doubt the most important phase in terms of the needs and what we're calling the relative benefits and community engagement has to be undertaken. And so without getting into the minutiae of that, one of the things, if anyone, Gerald, for example, you've read the terms of reference and our submission, and based on our meeting last week, you heard me indicate that the terms of reference calling for a public online survey down in what's referred to as phase 5, which is toward the end of the process. We respected that in terms of writing back our proposal, but we definitely think that's something that should be brought up earlier in the process. So what I've done is take that task, which was in phase 5, have moved it into a comprehensive task 10, which is community engagement and online surveys. And that really starts right now in terms of starting to have some meetings with each of the study area participant organizations. We'll work through the process to do that, and developing an online survey. We assume online is going to work. If online does not work for certain target groups, we're obviously happy to develop some hard copy opportunities to get feedback. I think we're all very flexible in that regard. But the idea is an online survey, which essentially goes out to everyone, whether you're a fan of aquatics, whether you ever want to see an aquatic center built, whether you like tax money being used for these kinds of things or want it to be used for something else. We want your opinion. And we ask people a series of questions that it's very important that you're unbiased. We have to ask them, what do they want? In other words, allow them to tell us what they want. A lot of people won't necessarily focus on the nuts and bolts of what it means to run a pool and the various, significant costs that are involved in doing that. They'll indicate what they want. They want an ease of registering their children for programs. They don't want to have to drive X kilometers to get to a pool on a Wednesday evening at 6 o'clock for a lesson for their kids. They might like the idea to be able to use a gymnasium and have their children or other members of the family use the pool at the same time, or use a gymnasium. In other words, there are some benefits to putting recreational services together. Whether or not that can happen is less important than hearing from people about what they would like to see happen. So we don't want to frame or control anyone's ambition in that survey. We want a little bit of blue skying from people. It will be our job, and I would suggest it would be the job of the committee here to start to, at the end of the process, mold those expectations into a series of practical realities for going forward, to be able to present back to the councils as to what the options are. So our approach, as it is in every study that we do, is not to bring finance in right at the beginning, because you want to make sure establish, just as we've written there in phase 3, what are the needs that are required. The paying for it, it's obviously it's essential, but it should be layered on afterwards. And as a result of bringing it all together, you end up with a range of options. So that's the sort of methodological process that we would follow. We end up with emerging options, would rationalize that as to why. We will reflect in as detailed a way as possible what the communities have indicated to us in terms of needs. And then Cal will be really sort of starting to visualize what that might be in terms of a footprint for a building.
Sean, I was just going to add that one of the blue sky things that we always say in the beginning is, people sometimes are uncomfortable with the pretend money is not an object, but I think sometimes that's a very good tool, good sort of idea to carry forward in the beginning, because sometimes the big blue sky ideas make the most financial sense, but you also want to plan for it, or at least talk about it, so that if your building is a 3-lane, 25-meter pool with no leisure pool and minimal facilities and no other spaces, you'd want to know if you're planning for a future that doubles that or has other facilities attached to it, so that you don't undersize the services to the site, that your traffic is going to work and you got room to expand, all that kind of thing. So that's why we say in a different way, from a design point of view, pretend money is not an object right at the start.
Yeah, thank you, Cal. It is important because there's so many circumstances that will be relevant right down to the choice of a preferred site and what that does to the look and feel and scale of the building. But at the outset, it is a case of what you need. And the other thing that we tend to do is we say don't plan for 2021. Think of this building in terms of what you're going to need as a community. Let's just, it doesn't matter the year, but we know it's out there in the future. So 2031, 2036, you're not going to build facilities continually every 5-10 years with having a shorter horizon. You have to look to have a building that's essentially going to be, we're going to develop some principles and run them past you as a committee, but the principle is this is a 40-year building. That's the kind of thing that you want to be able to build. And I say that because there are always options about enclosing outdoor pools or creating, a fabric skin building as ways to reduce the costs. And the terms of reference that you've presented do suggest let's have the long list of options. So we can provide the long list of options, but I think very quickly we can get to those which have that principle in mind, which is you're going to build to make it last as long as you can. So that gets into phase 4, identification of options, the long list. It's important that we do it on a criteria basis to try and objectively assess. As you can appreciate, there's lots of different opinions when you start to develop options and locations. People will have differences of weight that they attach to certain criteria, and we need to have that discussion. So task 15 there, when we get to actually try and go from a long list to a short list of options, that's going to be an interesting meeting. And that's the one, Gerald, I'd say, you're going to need the full 2 hours for that one and then some follow-up. But everyone will have a good handle on the project by that time. The funding analysis, without getting into detail on it, one of the things that we want to be able to get across to everyone is that, and I'm sure this is known on other projects that you have, is that the capital cost is one item. It's the ongoing operating subsidy that is just as big an issue, potentially, certainly over a 40-year life span of a building. So whilst the funding analysis will be looking for grants, looking to the extent that you can debt support any of this, and then in terms of the operating subsidy, that does fall to the communities, how that is established. Again, without kind of belaboring the phrase here, which is subject to your concurrence, we'll need some advice on you. These kinds of projects, we can do an awful lot of work to get to a point where there's a viable product, a viable location, a viable collaboration framework. If we are asked to create a cost-sharing formula, for example, that is quite precise, that can almost be a bridge too far, because there will be people that find that very difficult to necessarily wrap into a study like this. So things like cost sharing is in details is something that, from our work around the country, it can be very, very detailed. You might have a formula. The resulting formula at the end of the process could be quite different, because it is essentially a process of discussion between elected officials. But we'll need to have the discussion as to how far we go on this. We generally don't think it's a role in this study to get into making prescriptions that could potentially endanger the project if you're asked to take the study as a whole. So let's just sort of be aware of that. Phase 5, we're going to finalize some options, and then phase 6 is going back to the public and also going back to each of the communities to present to councils to get their feedback. And again, if we have collectively done our job, and I'll just suggest that's also the job of the advisory committee here, if we've collectively done our job, then that final series of presentations should be ones where there's a level of agreement going into the presentations. Doesn't mean that councils are going to necessarily vote entirely in favor without adjustments, but that's what we're trying to build, is a consensus-based approach to this project. The one thing you haven't seen in here in a lot of detail, but we talked about it last week, was location. We're going to have to look at location or a range of locations in order to inform our assessment of capital and operating cost, as well as scale of facility. So sorry to drag on detailed stuff, but just going to a better slide. I'm just going to give you some examples of buildings. And Cal, please put your designer's hat on, save everyone from the dry financial guys speak, and give us some thoughts. I'm just going to open something here. Hopefully everyone can see it. Can everyone see that?
We can't see anything opened up yet, just a link.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let's see if I can stop share and start sharing. Okay, just bear with me.
I'm wondering, after all that information, if now is a good time to just see if there's any questions from anybody on the committee, or if you'd like to save that to the round table a couple of points from now.
No, it was a lot of information. It tends to be with these work plans. Certainly, I'd be happy to for Cal and I to take any questions.
Sure. So does anybody have any questions? You can stick your virtual hand up, or you can stick your real hand up. I'll just scroll back and forth a few times and see if there are any hands of any sort. Yeah, Mayor McCorduff.
Thanks. When looking at the overall plan for the next 6 months, it seems to me that your plan, John, is that we would meet as a committee once a month. I was looking at the little squares on there. Am I correct in that?
Yes, Madam Mayor. I'm just going to bring it back up, okay, so I can have that. Everyone see that?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So that's correct. Basically, once a phase, and so there are 5-6 phases. So I think that was the intent, to certainly do that. We've got less than that in terms of number of technical reports, but I think during phase 3, for example, there's an opportunity that stretches over a couple of months for us to meet once a month. So yes, absolutely, once a month.
Thank you. Any more questions? I don't see any hands. So just blurt out if you did want to ask a question.
Just for me, Madam Chair, the intention of the actual terms of reference, even though it is 5 to 6 meetings, was exactly what we had just talked about, but with the flexibility to meet if needed. And I think, as John pointed out, as we move down into the different phases, there's going to be one time where we may need to do that for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I had some questions, if there's no other hands up. So, or just a couple of comments and a couple of questions, I guess. You answered one of them right there. I was wondering what sort of phase correlates to location or preferred site. I didn't see that there, but I think I understood that that's kind of ongoing and pulls in before the end.
Well, I think we'd like to understand prospective sites pretty quickly. So I would say drop that into phase 2. We really want to understand. We know there have been some candidate sites. We know there are obviously some obvious ways to minimize drive time for people, which is going to give us kind of a radius of where we should be looking. And then there are obviously questions about, whether a building should be co-located with something versus standalone, and if it's standalone. So site kind of informs everything. So I think, Gerald, to you and colleagues, we want to be able to start to exchange some information on exactly where these sites are, so we can start to give an overview of them.
Okay, thank you. I think, in my opinion, site's really important before we get to the end. Just knowing dynamics in our communities and sensitivities around dynamics in our communities. I think that we've spoken from the beginning about how it's going to be quite important for this to be as central as possible to all 3 communities. So that's just something to keep in mind. One point that when you were talking about public engagement and flipping it to phase 3, I agree that public engagement is something that we want to do sooner rather than later. But I guess my only concern, and it's not a concern with flipping it to phase 3, it's just something to keep in mind, and that we might need to engage the public more than once, is that looks like it falls in June and July, or July and August. And I think our experience tells us that engaging the public over the summer months is often a bit difficult. So maybe we just need to be more creative with the ways in which we try to engage, but that's something to just keep in mind as that goes forward. And then just one other point that I don't know how important this is to everybody else, but it's important to me. You mentioned that this is a collaborative effort, which to me is one of my favorite parts about the project, but also about how we might not want to be getting too into the weeds on a funding formula or what that looks like right now. I do think personally, and so I just like some more discussion around this at some point in time. It doesn't have to be now, obviously, but how do we get to that point? Because I think in the end, what would be really nice to have is a proposed, if the study shows that this is feasible, a proposed project that we can then go forward with a realistic view of what that looks like for all of our communities, including the 4th level of government that isn't here right now, the regional district. So unfortunately, they chose not to participate in this part of the process, but ideally they would be participating in any funding further down the road. So those are just my comments to flag for now. And I'll scroll one more time to see if there's any hands, and if there's not, hand it back over. I don't think so.
Hi, Petra. Madam Chair, I'd just like to reiterate the public engagement process. And one of the things I just wanted to mention that I was going to mention later is the fact that we're going to try to be as transparent as possible. I know some of our council meetings are live. This meeting isn't live, but it's being recorded for the purpose of people to know exactly what's going on. And I think that's a good thing. And it might be something that the committee itself may want to, discuss on how that's actually put out there.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Just real quick, if for the sake of transparency, as Gerald just mentioned, I think it's just going to be important that any information through this process that we're bringing to community, whether it's where we're at in the process or next steps, I just want to make sure that the Soyuz Indian Band is in a position, timing-wise, that we can communicate through newsletters in the way we communicate with the community here, that we're in sync.
Perfect. And what is the communication through newsletters?
They go out once a month.
Oh, okay. So I'll just hand it right back over to John.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, some great observations. I thank everyone for those. discuss those on the round table. So just to give you, you can see this. Let me know if you can see that diagram picture coming up. Anyone see that?
Not yet.
All right, I'm gonna
Blank white screen.
I'm gonna try again. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay. So what we wanted here, and I'll just see if I can expand it a little bit. This one is Germany, and what I wanted to do here is just give to that point about starting off a project with a level of imagination and aspiration. I think it really is important that people are allowed to do that, because it's actually, at the end of the day, despite us getting, you know, we'll end up with pro formas and cost sharing considerations and these things. At the end of the day, it's an exciting project, and the people who come and use this facility are going to take advantage of it. And like any of these major facilities, although there's a process to get it to implementation, 10 years, 15 years after, people will be asking about the utility of the building. Do they like the building? Does it have what they need? Is it in the place where it should be? So that's part of the reason that we have to kind of take the restraints off this exercise at the beginning. At the same time, it is about managing expectations. It really is. So these are some very significant examples that we're showing here. Did anyone see the page flip there? You can see that? Yeah, okay. Zoom is working. And you can see some great designs there with, you know, in that case, 2 tanks, you know, 6 lanes. So that's a sort of competition tank, but it'll be used for a range of things. And then there's a warm tank as where there could be a zero entry pool, as they refer to it, for accessible entry by both children and older adults and those that are otherwise non-ambulatory. And then you have some, this one is in, yeah, this one's in Vancouver. And I've no idea whether it's been developed or not, but we wanted to put this on screen because you just get a sense of there's a lot of things that can be done, and you'll see around the world in terms of imaginative design, etc. We're not suggesting necessarily for a moment that you're going to take a design from elsewhere, but I think there is an opportunity here to make sure that any building that you create, if it's in a prominent location, you have the discussion about the cost or the value proposition of creating a design so that it reflects the local cultural and architectural vernacular, right? There's a real opportunity there. As opposed to developing, you know, in Eastern Canada here, we like our pools to be shoe boxes with a couple of windows here and there. That's the 1980s version of it. So I think we do want to, we're not going to lead people in a survey and get them to get excited about spending millions and millions more than is necessary. That's not the aim here, and so they won't necessarily see this. But I think the message I really want to convey to you as community leaders is the first part of this exercise is really getting people interested about what they want to see in place.
John, I was just going to add about, from an architectural point of view, it is quite amazing just how many very striking buildings that win awards or make publications are aquatic centers. You know, you've got these free span spaces, the natural light into the deck is just a huge sort of transition over the last 10, 20 years. And with those large spans, you have these naturally somewhat striking buildings. You know, the first image was a building in the evening with the lantern look of the building. So your building in the right place is it going to be a landmark? Even if you don't want it to be, it's going to be somewhat of a landmark. So that's just something to keep in mind as you talk about siting form and character for that particular building. So
we could, you know, I'm just going to scroll. This one is a nice little cheap facility in Calgary. You can see this is absolutely spectacular. So this is just the point that Cal is making, is that this is a YMCA community and activity center. It's just, there are tremendous opportunities on a completely different scale than this to still in the idea of multi-use. And that's one of the conversations that we will have is, if the aquatic center that you're building, are you only building a pool with decking and change rooms? Or are you building something that has a range of other services in it, some of which might be ancillary, viewing areas, concession areas, small gas space. Do you need a gymnasium to be added to it? Is there an opportunity? So
I think I'll just jump in and say I'm getting a bit of feedback. I don't know if anybody else is, but if we can, I can't tell where it's coming from. It looks like we're all muted. If we can just double check.
Kevin needs to mute.
Just going to bring up a couple of other examples.
While you do that, John, I'll just add on to the multi-function, whether it's part of the original idea or a future plan. Pools use a lot of energy to heat the water, and there's places that ice rinks are the automatic co-locating, just because you suck the whole pool out of suck the energy out of the ice and pump it into your water. So, and that's pure practical as well as visionary for a future complex. So you might want to just keep that in the back of your mind as an example of an idea. And this is an example too. It reminds me the first time I stopped at the Kamloops facility on the way back from our project in Sun Peaks to charge my car, and I said, oh my God, this facility is just humming. Old people, young people, school kids. It's got tracks, it's got judo, it's got a pool, it's got outdoor facilities. I'm not saying that that's what you should be thinking about, unless perhaps that is what you should be thinking about at some point in the future. So just keep it in the back of your mind.
You must ask the question in a feasibility. You can't do a feasibility study for an aquatics facility unless you're asking what else do you need. And but that is not to say that suddenly you're presented with a $60 million project that's got a couple of ice sheets attached to it. That's not what we're saying. What we are saying is there are some real considerations about value proposition and looking down the road in terms of what is required. It might be about having a site that allows a modular build. We've just finished a piece of work in Fredericton where the cost issue is a very real one. And there are different options for creating a pool because the University of New Brunswick was closing its pool. So suddenly that cost fell upon the municipality and also the surrounding municipalities. There's no county structure. There's no RDOS in New Brunswick. There is just municipalities and then rural areas. And there's a need to cost share that kind of facility. But the opportunity for putting a field house or a gymnasium attached to it, whether or not that gets built, I don't think that is going to get built in the first phase. The site is there. It's a modular addition. So we have to start thinking about this. So this one that you see here as an example there of a fairly significant, restaurant concession area as opposed to, a smaller provision, a nice gymnasium space attached to it. This is Meadowvale, which is Toronto, Vaughan, Universal Change Room, a non-dedicated youth space. So in other words, that ping pong table you see there, table tennis can be used can be cleared out and used for other purposes. Could be a senior center for part of the day, could be a teaching space, could be any number of things. And then you have a sprung floor gymnasium of some significance there. Viewing. I don't think you would be building a facility that didn't have the capacity to be able to have, family viewing that isn't just necessarily tucked away at the top left-hand corner of the building, accessed by a narrow, inaccessible staircase, non-accessible staircase. So there are things that we want to bring to this exercise that we will bring back to you as a committee for consideration and based on community input. We want to know whether people want a water slide versus zero access, zero entry pools to the side of them, whether they want warm pools, what kind of programming they're looking for. This is the kind of stuff we need. This again is just an example up the road from me in Toronto, a new community area. But you know what we're trying to get across here is that there's an innovation that you can have, which is a good use of space. So in this case, you got the inverted rock climbing wall, which is great fun for everyone. And it's obviously movable as well. So things can come and go. This is the kind of thing we want from people. Cal, do you want to speak about the roof? I mean, if you have enough money and time and resources, the natatorium, as they call it, is a significant architectural element.
Yeah, there's varying examples of really interesting structures. You know, woods big in BC, and you know, cross-laminated timber, manufactured wood products for the beam and or slab system is a big one. It's still, in our experience, it is a premium, so that's something to consider if that's the place to do wood. And it is a moist, humid environment, so environmental separation is something to keep in mind. And wood's got some tolerance for those fluctuations, whereas steel, if you don't get it coated properly, will rust. So there's some choices to make. I don't think we'll make them at this stage, but in terms of some level of budgeting, thinking about money, you could have a spectacular composite truss and CLT roof, or open up steel joists and a monoslope or a flat roof. There's some, and you don't have to sacrifice architecture. You could spend your money in one place or another. So it'd be good to get a bit of feedback on that, but not.
Zoom call for the
Background noise again.
Hi, Mike.
Mike, I think I heard your voice, so I'm going to blame it on you.
Yeah.
Plenty of examples. Here's one. This is from somewhere in just outside of Halifax, just to, you know, slightly older facility. But again, the idea of putting in, you know, a permanent water slide feature, it takes a bit of space. But this is what we're going to hear from people. It's not all about lane swimming, far from it. These pools need to be effectively programmed. We've seen examples where you'll have a lane pool, a 25-meter lane pool, but it's part of a broader pool that suddenly then spreads out. So it's the same tank, but it is it's shaped in a different way to be able to accommodate all of the various users. So.
And I think one of my thoughts around the idea of asking people what they want and blue sky it, do ask them to rank as much as you can get them to rank their preference, because the risk is everybody says, well, I would like to have it all, but that's not really the question. The question is, if you could have it all in the order of preference, what are your priorities? What would you rather have? Would it be a light filled space because glass is more expensive than wall? Or would it be to have the leisure pool or the lazy river pool or a big, huge community hot tub? Or like, we should get people their top 3 or their top 10. List everything they would love to have and rank so that we could help define some kind of program before we finish this first process.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, and that's exactly what we'll be doing, is getting people to get to a level of detail about choices, and we use that information to, as you say, build up a functional space program along with our research work that we do, and that involves obviously understanding exactly what we're talking about. You know, the 3 study service area participants, but we have to have a consideration for who might also come from elsewhere. How big is this market area for this pool? Because we have to look at the likely programming demands now and in the future and build that into the scale of the facility. This question about whether you build for today or build for 10 years down the road, it's critical to getting it right. There are so many facilities that you have that are, within a few years, it's clear they were undersized.
I'm just going to stop for a second. I see Myers with his hand up.
I just have a question regarding, I see this called the East Link Community Center. And I know that there's some grants and stuff that go along with wood ceilings and different things regarding the structures. So when you figure in the funding and we get to that point, is that something we look at as well as looking for something like the East Link, or we look for what kind of grants are available for a wood structure versus a metal structure, that type of thing?
I'll kick it off. If Cal has anything to add, please do. Yeah, the grants that you're going to be going after are going to be the larger government grants, but there can be obviously naming rights that you want to be. This is Eastlink is the local telecommunications company. You saw the YMCA in Calgary there. That's the kind of thing. As for the use of natural elements versus other kinds of things, Cal might be able to speak to it. I will tell you that one of the questions that I'd be interested to know from your perspective as from OIB and from the two councils is what level of commitment you have to environmental sustainability in the building practices, whether that be as much as net zero, or whether or not it's about doing what you can to ensure that you minimize the carbon footprint as a result of these buildings. That usually adds to the cost. In a study like this, Cal and colleagues can give some indication of the choices, and there may be grants attached to that. Cal, do you have any thoughts on that?
I think the first thing that comes to mind is the demands of the pool deck, the natatorium, because of the environmental conditions. And there's vapor and humid, temperature pressures there. You really want to be careful when you make choices that you do it consciously, because some will perform better than others. Whereas I think the rest of the building, the public areas, the viewing areas, the outside of that controlled humid environment is where there's a whole lot more freedom I'll use the word play around with materials and have more natural materials. The pool deck, if you don't get your tile right and your slip resistance right and somebody falls, it's really hard to do if you want to have a very cool, interesting concrete deck or a rammed earth wall or some kind of very interesting piece of architecture. It might not give you the performance you really need to have in certain technical spaces that have those specific, standards you need to meet.
There are some, in terms of the pool tanks themselves, there are kind of couple of different technologies. One is the traditional, concrete and then tiled surface. And, in some parts of the country, getting the trades in to be able to build, these tiled surfaces can be more of a cost than in other places. But, it also has some operating implications. If you need to replace tiles at a certain point, you have to, you can do so, and then you may have the challenge of the tiles look out of sync with the rest of the pool. That happens with older pools. The other technology is offered by companies like Merthyr, which essentially is a metal liner tank, and you design it and you drop it in. There are a tremendous amount of cost advantages to either, because they both have operating implications in terms of the level of technical expertise you need to bring in to solve some of the problems if there's a leak and things like that. But that's something that I think will give you some advice on what the opportunities are once we hear back from people in terms of the kinds of things they want to see in this building.
I see Barry with his hand up as well.
Thank you, Petra. I guess, thank you for sharing all these pictures but my question becomes, we've entitled this study, an aquatic center. And I'm wondering if that's too narrow a focus when we go to the public, because how do you create that vision when people are focused on the aquatic center, and kind of brings out the pool has some negative attachments to it for a lot of people that may get in the way of opening up their minds. And I'm wondering if it's too late to change the kind of the presentation of this center to something bigger than just the aquatic center, so that we can open people's minds up. And so that's my first point. My second point is, I'm taking some, and I appreciate all the architecture, and I agree with you, architecture is really important, but the heads up, because when we have an experience relative to Soyuz with our fire hall with architecture, and there was a lot of negative feedback relative to the expense of architecture versus practicality, and the big box versus the architecture that we spent some additional money on. So just a couple comments I wanted to share at this particular point in time.
Well, thanks. And just if I could just speak to the first one in particular, because I think it's an important observation, which is, are we constraining ourselves? The way we've done it, and one other example was to recognize that the genesis for this piece of work, going out to the public, getting this committee together, it is aquatics. It is focus here is aquatics, but how you present that in communications to the public and in any kind of questionnaire that you design, you make it very clear that there is an opportunity. There will be a cost, but there will be an opportunity to consider what else might be needed in a building that would be that would have at its core an aquatic center. So I would just say that probably remains the approach to take. We will get to those other things that can happen in the building, which as you heard me say, some are ancillary, others are not ancillary. They are co-located. They are definable uses by themselves, like a gymnasium, for example. I mean, we haven't got into it yet, so I don't know whether there is a need for any replacement of rinks and things. And I'm not trying to layer on more complexity to this project, but I think you stick with the idea it's an aquatics center. But to your point, we have to communicate that aquatic centers around the country don't just include aquatics. That's typically what we do see. They're not generally dedicated facilities.
Yeah.
I had another, just speaking to that again, I agree with you. And I'm hoping the committee latches on to that type of vision as well, because this particular facility could have the opportunity to supplement what we have now and build toward the future of broader activities, and again, I look at, I just following the press, and you hear there's a huge pickleball community. Well, how do you get people on side? You build their activity into what is proposed. And I know that over the years, there's been discussions about need for indoor soccer and pickleball, and all these types of activities can be coexistent in my mind, to build on a facility that could truly provide for the supplemental activities of the community as a whole.
Just on top of that, Barry, over time, all your communities have infrastructure. I know some of it is aging, maybe a lot of it. So, in the back of your mind, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, well, should this be planned to be step one of sort of a future hub of recreational facilities for the region? So as Oliver and Soyuz rinks become too expensive to maintain, to operate, to replace that whole refrigeration plant stuff, build a new one here for example. That's just one thing that comes to mind. So you don't have to plan for it now. You don't have to pay for it now, but design it so that if that ever was something that made sense, it's somewhat easier to accommodate than if you didn't think about it now.
Anybody around the table that's been involved in this before have a deja vu shudder?
Yeah, sorry.
I did.
Well, as an architect, I have no choice but to be optimistic. And just to segue into the comment around the cost of things. Yeah, there's always a cost, and it's always a balance and a trade-off and a compromise. I think that the one thing to be cognizant of, if a space like this if it was a dark enclosed, no natural light space, is it worth doing? Are people going to come, or a bunch of people that would otherwise support and pay good money to come to have a pleasant experience, not because one didn't put enough thought and money into building a nice space? And the architect in me says, well, if you're going to spend, this many million, let's do a good piece of architecture. And I don't mean spend more to do a good piece of architecture. I just mean plan it so that it's a good, efficient building, and everyone smiles as they drive up to the front door and when they leave after a nice swim or lays in the hot tub.
So I think these are great comments. So thank you, Barry, and thank you, Cal, on this. Is that we're going to need the advice of the committee to, when we get to a point, we're going to come back obviously with some broad measures of cost. And there's certain things you can buy for a certain cost. And certain sites are going to imply certain costs because there will be implications for servicing and site development. There probably is a tipping point at which the capital cost, even though that the assumption is it's going to have to be grant funded to a degree, and part of our work is to show if you vary that degree, what does it do to the tax-based support that's required. We're going to have those discussions so that this is what you get for one price, this is what you get for another, this is what you get if you add more things to the building. Where on that continuum is the value proposition that's going to be most acceptable to most people? Not easy to define, but we're going to need to have those kinds of conversations because, as I said at the outset, either we get given a price, this is what you can build, and I don't think that's the approach you want to take. So it's all about creating the value and showing what that is at the end of the day.
I'm not sure if we actually lost our chairperson, but Councillor King had his hand up as well.
Yeah, if I could just comment. I like the idea of the blue sky, but I think it really comes down to the size of the piece of property we have and what becomes realistic to add on to an aquatic center plus parking.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are the kind of practicalities that I think pretty quickly we need to come back. So if we can get on to the site question as part of our next steps, I think it'll give Cal and I the ability to generate some of those considerations, pros and cons, as you say.
Perfect, thank you. And I'm here just reserving battery power with the video off. So I think we have half an hour left scheduled together. I'll hand it back over to John.
Yeah, so I think that's really it in terms of our sort of review of schedule and project and if you like, philosophy of method, how we do this. And I hope I haven't scared anybody by saying that we need to kind of have eyes bigger than our stomachs to begin with, but gradually everything will come into focus and we will start to scope. But right at the outset, I think we need to be asking the bigger questions, even if those questions have, I suspect, from what just picking up on what people have said, you've had these discussions before. So that's what we need to do. In terms of our next steps, well, we're going to dive into the information gathering, and that includes site information. Gerald, you've got from me a list of information needs that we should discuss maybe before the end of the week if you have a chance.
Yep.
That includes, getting various bits of site-related information from you. I am assuming that RDOS is a keeper of a number of these pieces of site-related info, mapping and things like that.
Yeah, we can, we're on top of that starting already this morning, so we'll have that available.
Okay. And then, you know, I think probably a good idea, as you got under item 9, next meeting, if we could discuss next meeting, and then Cal and I can see what we want to get done in order to meet that meeting.
I ask a question about sites or site. I know it came up during our first meeting, and it's something that should be part of a study for sure. But would this committee say there is a site? Everybody knows there is a site. This is the site, or is that still open for us as a consultant to give you some, I'll use the word objective advice?
I have an answer to that, but I'm going to wait for the committee.
Okay.
My response to that would be that there is a site that has come up in conversation in previous years, not because it was the very best site, not that it wasn't the very best site, it was just the only space that we could come up with that may be available that fit the criteria of being large enough, not being in the ALR, and being somewhat in the middle of the 3 communities. But I think that personally, I would like to know what all is available as part of this process. I don't know if that, I see some heads nodding. If there was any other answers, please feel free to jump in.
Can I say that I agree that there has been a site that was identified at one point. I'm sure there may be others, and I think it's part of this committee's job and your job, John and Cal, to perhaps identify if there are other sites. I think that's the whole thing. We need to look at all of the possible areas before we zero in on anything.
That just quickly, that exactly was going to be what I was going to suggest, is that regardless of there being a possible candidate site, I think it's really important that we think broadly at this stage in terms of possible sites.
Barry's the only one waiting patiently with his hand up.
I guess as a suggestion, because you know we know our communities better than the consultants, and potentially to help the consultants out. What would you think of the idea that we're all focused on one central site as being the central site, but each community provide one site as an option besides the central site, and then those particular sites can be discussed at least, and that way, you know, because I can think of 2 or 3 sites in Soyuz, but you know I know nothing about Oliver relative to potential sites, but you know, in helping the consultants out and helping the group out, that we would be able to narrow it down.
Well, from a consulting point of view, I think we would be, as long as it's not an onerous task for you to do that, I think we're open to any suggestions. One of the things that we are getting is mapping, which involves ownerships. And so we'll have parcel fabrics that tell us lands which are available by virtue of the ownership. So if you like, not in private ownership, and assumed to be in otherwise productive use, but lands which might be owned and possibly available. So we kind of go through that exercise. We would generally develop a footprint, so we'd have a sense of what acreage is required just for the building, and then we apply criteria such as you don't want a site that's too small, because why build on a site which you can't expand? You know, why build on a cliff edge unless there's a great reason for it? Or maybe there is. But so we need to do our homework on that. Barry, but to the extent that your knowledge and expertise can throw up a few sites, I think it would be great if you are willing to do that.
I think it's important that we also include the Soyuz Indian Band because they may have some property between Oliver and Soyuz that we're not aware of that Mike would know. And so there could be some other potential in between the communities as well as just Oliver and Soyuz.
Jim, did you want to jump in there too?
Yeah, I do, because these three groups have actually met a few years back and some of this was discussed. I would find it very difficult for people in Soyuz to support a pool in Oliver, and I would think vice versa. So to the consultants, if you were to identify a different location than where we've kind of focused on earlier in the process would be a benefit. But to identify a piece of property in each town, I think is a no starter. That's my comment.
Well, I appreciate the comment. We have had similar experience. I think your point is very well taken, that getting a site right that everybody can justifiably get behind may mean that, just as an example, you may have the best site, but it's just in the wrong location from the point of view of having a collaboratively defined project. So, yeah, thank you.
I just wanted to add to that as well that on our purpose on page 1 of the terms of reference, it does talk about that, about the preference of different locations or whatever. So it's already in there.
Yeah, I see it. Thank you. Petra, can I maybe, unless there are other hands up, can I put it back to you? I think I've addressed item 7, if you agree, and you'd be on to 8.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. So I think that we've done quite a nice job of having a bit of back and forth throughout, but we're on the round table portion of the meeting. So if there were any other comments or questions or ideas that came up, would it be, whoever's sharing their screen, would it be able to take that down? Then I can see everybody all at once. And if anybody's waving a hand crazy or has their virtual hand up. So if there are any questions, comments, ideas, concerns, anything at all that you'd like to talk about, now would be the time. Barry, is your hand up again?
Sorry, my hand's up again.
Okay. No, that's good. Just making sure it's not left over.
I have a question relative to the terms of reference and its relationship to some type of providing options for governance models, because it's one thing to build these facilities, but the question becomes, how will it be operated and how are we going to present to the public the options for how this particular facility could be operated? That's my one point. The other, in speaking to a service area, I'm wondering if the thought has been gone to cross the border into Oroville and take a look at what the population base is there and what the potential for use of a facility would be out of the US. And certainly my next point relates to the fact that the regional district is not involved in this particular feasibility study, and I have an understanding of that based on the history, but they were at the table before. They're not at the table now. The question becomes, how do we engage the residents of the regional districts in area A and C so that they are part of the process, even though the regional district is not funding the feasibility study. And lastly, this is a really, depending on how this project moves ahead, it could be a showcase for climate change and relative to construction and things like, there is going to be a lot of money kicking around here in the next couple of years relative to climate change and how buildings are built, and hopefully we can latch on to some of that that particular money. And those are my comments for now.
I could so cross-border potential, yeah, we can look at that from a market trade area point of view. It's a drive time type assessment, and on the assumption that obviously in the future things are going to be normalized. As it relates to engaging RDOS residents, yeah, I think we do. Just to cure my ignorance, when you refer to areas A and C, those are sections of RDOS, are they? That we should be, they're geographic areas that we'll find on a map?
That's rural Soyuz and rural Oliver.
Right. Okay. Well, yeah, so ideally, we would be able to go to our DOS and say, we have a survey, your residents are going to fill it in one way or the other, because it's going to be advertised through the various media. If they have any lists of people that they know they can actually put it on their website, that would be helpful. And regardless of whether they're in the study or not, their residents are going to be users of this facility, and we need to be able to access them. So that would be the pitch that I would suggest. And I think whether it's Petra or Gerald or the civic leaders, I think that outreach should be the first thing that we try and do. And I'm not sure why there would be any hesitation to do that. They'd be simply advertising a study that is underway.
Go ahead, Myers. I'm just going to move aside where there's no dog barking.
Okay. I talked to Vander. They just built their pool, and I know them quite well. I used to live up there and be in council. And one of the things they did on the cost of their operation, just to share with their group, is when they built the pool, the ongoing cost was a concern, and they went outside of the QP, and they give a contract to the YMCA, and the YMCA actually operates the pool, not the town. So therefore it's not QP wages paid in the pool. And that was a big operating saving for them, just to share that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, the YMCA. So there was a question, I think, earlier about governance and how you do it. So there are a number of different models that we can consider, and we can throw up what the implications are. One of which is having an expert service provider like the YMCA. They would be, they're always a group that we need to be talking to about these kinds of facilities, regardless of where they are.
Barry?
Yeah, just going back to the regional district, and again, what's going to be part of the feasibility study. Is there going to be any options presented if, because it's going to be very difficult to try and justify building a facility of this nature without their understanding that if you don't pay now as part of the group, there is potential that your people are going to have to pay. So for some type of models or options relative to user fees, the user fees options, that if you're not part of the tax-based subsidy process, this is how it's going to have to happen. These are the options.
Yeah, we can do. I mean, as you can tell, I'm hesitant to put these kinds of landmines in a report, because you can jeopardize what is in the rest of the report. That is, everyone could, including potentially a reader from council of the RDOS could get on board behind this, some clear statements. That's why there's always a good idea to have a separation of some of these more controversial points. What we can do is indicate, and we have to understand how cost sharing is done in the region, because it differs across the country. But the model could be, you could use non-resident user fees, but I think the likelihood is that non-resident user fees would never be enough to cover the incremental cost of these non-taxpayers coming in and using the facility. And so that's a challenge. There are some nightmare cases across the country where, they've ended up with membership charges for anyone that wants to come in and use city facilities, and it can be a very, very high amount. That can even get challenged legally in some cases. In the case of, there are some success stories. Gerald and I have spoken about one that we're both familiar with up in Spruce Grove in Edmonton, for example, where Parkland County, the county there, is an active participant with two towns, Spruce Grove and Stony Plain, in developing their major facility. They have a governance model, it works. I think, Barry, we would try and lay out all of the different measures that you might use for cost sharing, whether it be population, weighted assessment, users, proportion of users, or some amalgamation of all those approaches. But I am hesitant, unless you tell us otherwise, I'm hesitant to come forward with a prescription for what should happen, because I think at the end of the day, that's something which councils need to debate, the principle of it.
Yeah, I agree. I wasn't asking for a prescription. I was just, are the options going to be presented in some way, shape, or form?
Yeah, we'll get to the discussion for sure, but we don't want to, damage the outcome of the study.
And I think Carol put in the chat, I'm not sure if everybody saw it there, just that the regional district is currently undertaking their master parks and facilities plan and beginning their community engagement. So depending on our timelines, that might be somewhere to link in. I think the general feeling, I believe, if I can speak to the general feeling, is that it's unfortunate that the regional district or the Area A and Area C directors decided not to participate at this point, meaning they decided not to cost share at this point for the feasibility study. But when it comes to community engagement and feedback from the community, that is like half the population of the area. So our community engagement and feedback that we need is from the residents of the whole entire area. And my feeling is that we just forge ahead, knowing that in the end, we're either all in or we're all out. And the opportunity for us, just the opportunity of that the project presents 4 levels of government participating, 3 distinct communities, that's huge and potentially trend setting as far as collaboration goes. So I think we just, they're not here at the table. The directors, unfortunately, aren't a part of the faces in the Hollywood squares. But as we move forward, we engage all of our communities equally. So, okay, I just realized that it's still back to me. So are there any other questions, comments, concerns, anything at all that's arisen over the last hour or nearly 2 hours that anybody would like to quickly throw out there before we move on to the talking about our next meeting? Yeah, Myers?
Just one question or one note, Petra. John and Cal both know that you and Mayor Sue and the Mayor of Oliver, you're all on the regional district. So although the regional district's not here in same regional district, you're actually here and you have the report behind you to know what's happening to pass that on to them.
Yeah, that's a super great point that I did not even think to make. So thank you for making that.
Thank you.
Carol?
Hi, yes, thank you. I just wanted to echo some of the I think really important observations from Barry and from Chair Ventimiglia, and that's that, if we're talking about community engagement, being successful in community engagement, the last thing we want to do is ask, well, where do you live? Because it does matter what they say regardless of where they live. And so we don't want to come at this from that perspective. Well, they're not at the table now, therefore that opinion is, it is, we're going to get input from everybody, whether we like it or not, and that's what we want. So I guess I just wanted to highlight that I don't think that we need to be, I agree that we should be focusing on engaging as many people as possible about how they currently use facilities like this, how far they would go to use a facility like this, as much information as we can get. And also just echoing Barry's comments about potential operating models, because I think if we're really talking about the feasibility, this is a big one. which I don't think can be left, personally, I don't think should be left for it to be duked out behind closed doors about the kind of operating models that could be utilized. For example, Mayor Johansson's experience with the YMCA, the H2O, or a private company versus a municipality taking on the operation of a facility that's shared by different service areas. And I think it's going to be really important to have that discussion with this committee, because that is a part of a project being feasible moving forward, in my opinion.
If I could just add just on that, so on the latter point, it is, it's not feasible unless it's cost shared for any one of these participants, without question. So we do need to tackle it in at least in principle terms, and the types of method that you could use to arrive at it. Your point about don't ask where people live. I understand what you're saying, Carol, and if that's the decision, that's fine. But and it's a bit of a crutch for us, as we love to know where people live, because we can actually then see what people are saying from each community, and we try and use that in good faith in coming forward with the plans. If you take that off the table, and if there is a rationale to do that, and you've articulated that, then we just need to know that, all of us need to know that going in, that we're not going to be able to answer the question about if there's a statement that, well, that's just what you think, you live there. We will not know. We will just have people's responses. So I kind of like what you're saying. It's something we usually have a safety net of knowing where people live. So maybe it's something to think about as we go forward. That's all I would say on that.
Sorry, and I put that in the chat, but I'm sorry, that must have come across totally wrong. I'm not saying let's not find out. I'm just saying let's not exclude people because they're not a part of one of the service areas sitting at this table. That's all I meant. It's a real benefit to knowing, if you're saying about how far will you drive, if you don't know where they live, that's going to be hard to gauge. So yeah, my apologies. I totally support that. It's more just, we really want to hear from everybody, I think.
Okay. Thanks
right. And it's not that, oh, your community paid, so your opinion is ×2, and oh, you didn't pay, so you're half a percent. Jim.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Carol, what's the timeline for the Parks Master Plan from the RDOS?
Well, that's a really good question, Jim. I don't know if I can answer that, but they've just put up some big boards for community engagement. And I know that the number 2 things that got put on our board was an indoor pool facility. So yeah, I'll be interested to see what that timeline is. I think they're working on a pretty quick turnaround with this particular part of the project. But I can definitely find out and report back.
No, that would be great, because the 2 mayors are on the RDOS also. I'm sure we'll get some feedback between the 3, because it's kind of interesting. Your park is in Oliver, but you're funded through the RDOS. So it's just kind of funny. I want the consultants to understand that.
It's not funny, Jim. It's innovative. Thanks for all that back and forth. So I don't see any other hands, virtual or real. So I guess we'll move on to talking about our next meeting, and am I supposed to be proposing dates for our next meeting, or shall I turn this over to someone who has a bit more knowledge?
I just asked a question. I really leave it kind of up to the consultants. I don't know how much information they can gather in a week or 2 weeks or 4 weeks. So I guess I would like to get some feedback from the consultants, what feedback they could give us in a certain amount of time.
Sorry, I was just losing battery. I just had to change location. Yes, certainly not a week or 2. I think we would be looking at probably 4 weeks out from today. Today is the 5th. So first week of
June 2nd.
It's my daughter's birthday, so it has to be during the day. But yes, that week would certainly work. Yeah.
I can work with John to see if we can actually come up with a date around that time, or the first week in June, and we can put it out there and see if everybody could agree on a time.
Yeah.
Perfect. Sounds good.
I would be
Good
looking
goals.
at sort of, while we have everybody on here, if we could come to consensus, Wednesday mornings, me personally, works great. We don't have council meetings on Wednesday. I don't think Oliver has Wednesday mornings, so they might be available. So maybe we could move it to the 9th, and we can come to consensus right now.
I could do the second during the day, like it's just to be serious about it. So if we did it at the same time as now, that's not a problem.
So did I hear that if we actually schedule something right now, it will be needed?
It would be easier.
The timing will, no, but the timing, sorry, will be,
Well, what we would do, we would, we have a month to get going on various aspects of our work. So wherever we are in that work, I think we want to be able to come back and have the conversation with you. If we've got absolutely nothing to say, then we wouldn't want to waste your time. But I think you can assume within 4 weeks we'd be able to advance our understanding, at least to bring you up to speed. We can keep you in touch as to whether we think we need an hour of your time or an hour and a half. We can do that through Gerald.
I also think if we chose a regular set date like we're doing, we wouldn't have to post official notices or anything like that as well. So people would know if we do it once. And obviously we would still post it to the public so they know and aware of the meetings are being held. So
yeah,
sure. Sounds good. So if we want to just go ahead then with presuming that we're talking Wednesday, June the 2nd.
at 10 a.m. Pacific time.
Yeah. Sounds about right. So yes, that sounds great. First Wednesday of the month moving forward, unless something changes between now and then.
Sounds good. Cal, not good with you?
Yeah, I chatted to say 10:30, but 10 is fine too. So I blocked out 10 to 2 on the 2nd.
Awesome. Okay. Everybody gets along so well. That's fabulous. So if there's nothing else, then I think that's it for now. Thank you very much to everybody who presented, and thank you very much to everybody who joined in. And we'll see you in a month, if not sooner.
Thanks, Petra, for an excellent job of managing the meeting.
Yep.
Thanks. It's nice to see you, Barry.
Well,
good to see you guys as well.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody.
Good day.
Thank you.